name is Vadran, and I'm a technical analyst for BeInCrypto. And today with me is going to be Konstantin, who is our global trader. And yeah, today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and gold, and basically give our ideas as to whether Bitcoin will eventually become a sort of replacement for gold, or a sort of digital gold, or maybe just exist side by side. So yeah, it's basically just going to be a back and forth talk, less technical analysis than previous time. Like obviously we're going to show some charts, but it's mostly going to be some fundamental ideas. Sure, so I start. Okay, so basically at first, just sort of let's define it. So the main idea for Bitcoin as a replacement for gold is on account of it being a store of value. So basically, a store of value is an asset class that does not lose its value over time, similarly to how fiat does. So basically, while fiat currencies are pretty convenient as daily mediums of exchange, or maybe preserving short-term liquidity due to the lack of volatility, they do not really retain their value that much over time. So, as a result of that, basically, gold has been considered a major store of value for thousands of years, mostly because investors have been, rightfully so until now, convinced that their wealth will preserve itself over time. Additionally, gold has obviously several properties which make it a very useful and convenient store of value, like its durability, its rarity, its mobility, and its convertibility. So basically, it's relatively difficult to destroy a bar of gold. There is sufficient scarcity for it to be considered a store of value, and it can also be used as a medium of exchange, since obviously numerous lenders, let's say, accept gold. Additionally, due to the fact that supply is limited and pretty predictable, unless obviously new gold mines are found, there is less correlation between gold and other assets, such as equities and real estate, since basically market movements do not affect it as much. So yeah, for gold, it's not just individuals. So historically, numerous governments have recognized the value of gold. So basically, throughout history, the gold standard has been adopted in several years, meaning that the value of fiat money was backed by gold. And yeah, while this method was really effective at combating inflation, it did restrict the government's capacity to generate cash, and by 73 it was abandoned by this government. Okay, so yeah, when we move to Bitcoin, so the first thing, like the first parallel sort of that we can draw, is basically it has a fixed supply cap. So this is better than gold in this case, actually, since the fixed supply is at 21 million, and obviously more coins cannot be made, unlike gold, which like you can still find a mine. Actually, even if we count for all the lost Bitcoin, the value is probably lower than 21 million, but obviously we can't make any estimations as to accurate estimations as to the exact value of Bitcoin in existence. Additionally, so far Bitcoin has been a very good store of value. Obviously, it has been in a, like, looking at it from a long-term perspective, it has been in a bull run for like its existence, basically. It's also obviously a perfect unit of account, because you can divide it into what, 8 million satoshis, if I'm not mistaken, or 800k, I know. And then it's also a medium of exchange, because it can be accepted by basically lots of lenders. So yeah, the arguments pro Bitcoin are, obviously the first one is scarcity, since there is a limited supply cap. Basically, it's a good medium of exchange because of its interchangeability. So basically, a Bitcoin and a Bitcoin are always the same. So you can't have, let's say, a better Bitcoin than someone else. It's like one Bitcoin, the same one, while that's not true for gold. Like basically, gold can have various types of impurities. So there's like different types of gold, while Bitcoin is just Bitcoin. Divisibility, like I said, because you can divide it into like lots of smaller parts, lots of satoshis. And one more thing which I actually forgot to discuss earlier is storage. So basically, it's a lot easier to store Bitcoin than it is to store gold. Basically, if you have, let's say, tens and hundreds of millions worth of gold, you need basically a vault in order to store them, or you have to store it with someone else. While with Bitcoin, you can just do it on your offline storage wallets, like Ledger, basically. And yeah, like with this also comes portability, since obviously, like if you have to store it in just a small USB, it's really easy for you to transfer it. And yeah, basically, so right now gold has a market cap of 11.3 trillion. And if, let's say, Bitcoin were to capture all of that in its entirety, and so we were to divide that market cap by 21 million, which is the number of Bitcoin, we would arrive at a price of 540K per Bitcoin. So yeah, basically, if Bitcoin had the entire market cap of gold, one Bitcoin would cost 540K dollars. Yeah, so Konstantin, let's move to you, I guess.
Yeah, so you already brought up a lot of good points that I wrote down. So what I can see is that we have a much higher growth potential, as you already mentioned, due to the fact that that Bitcoin has a fraction of gold's market cap. But I also think Bitcoin is much easier to acquire, and gold purchases are becoming increasingly difficult. So that's also a point that Bitcoin is much more accessible and much more anonymous, because a lot of gold purchases require KYC, and now with a lot of exchanges, they require that as well. But Bitcoin is still much more anonymous in that sense.
Agree.
Also, when it comes to transferability and transport, people forget what happens if you really have to flee the country or leave the country. Because if you only own gold in terms of paper, and somebody else stores that for you, that's highly risky. And in a real crisis, nobody cares if you own on paper gold. So you have to own it yourself. And if you own it yourself, you have to protect it, and you have to be aware that if the wrong people are aware that you're storing gold at your house, that you could become a target. And also let's try to leave the airport with with like
Gold.
gold. Yeah, you know what will happen, and that's like almost impossible. Whereas Bitcoin wallets can be completely anonymous. Nobody needs to know that you own Bitcoin. So that's a huge advantage. And then also, I think that the main advantage of gold is obviously that it's time tested. But then again, the time is changing rapidly, and I could imagine that our central banking system is establishing a Bitcoin standard. Maybe maybe they cannot avoid it in the future. We will see. But what I want to say with that is just that the how can I say that, the mood is changing. People are they're growing up with digital media. They are living on their smartphones. Kids nowadays, they are living like 16 hours a day in front of their smartphones. And back then, gold was much more mainstream. So that also changed a lot, and I could imagine Bitcoin becoming more attractive to the new generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and apart from that, I think you mentioned everything. As of now, the Bitcoin inflation rate is much lower than the gold's inflation rate, and it's much more predictable. Also, with the block halving, it's decreasing, so it doesn't get more. Whereas gold, we we don't even have proof that gold is actually rare. So that's just like the current state where we assume gold is rare, but we don't really know. So that's also a pro argument for Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, if I mean not if, but while we're getting this generation change, like Bitcoin seems to be much more desirable. Even like if you don't just look at data, just going, I know, like from my head, like basically young people don't really consider investing in gold that much. Like you said, they're mostly interested in the internet and in like portable smart devices. So just going by that, having something as Bitcoin really helps them in that regard. So yeah, and basically like sometimes I consider the comparison as something slightly negative at one time for Bitcoin, because I know, like when you're saying that Bitcoin is similar to gold, you're kind of saying that it is not a currency, but it is more an asset, because it also kind of makes sense since like I mean, it's much more difficult and slower to do transactions on Bitcoin than it is on like various other cryptocurrencies. But I mean, yeah, you can say the same about gold, right? Like you don't see anybody going with a small bar of gold in order to buy stuff at the supermarket or anything like that. So it's an asset which like ideally appreciates over time and stores its retains its value during hard times. So yeah, in that case, even though it's like the oldest blockchain, like it's still probably one of the most secure ones. And yeah, definitely, even if it is not used for like everyday transactions like Ethereum is right now, basically for various drops or NFT marketplaces, or even like paying gas or whatever. Still, like as a store of value, it seems to have a very potentially interesting use case.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, I was so yeah. One this also kind of, in my opinion, also cancels out one potential drawback for Bitcoin, which is its volatility, especially its short-term volatility,
Yeah, short term. Yeah.
because yeah, if you're an investor and you're interested in long-term growth, then I mean, sure, volatility matters, but short-term volatility doesn't really have a perfect correlation with long-term store value. So if it's appreciating higher but at a very up and down rate, you're still fine with it if you're using it as a store of value, obviously. But if you're using it as a medium of exchange, then no, that would be hard, because like you might have to use it at the bottom of its range movements. Also, everyone, if you're watching this, then do not miss an airdrop from the exchange OKX. Basically, just click the link on the description below, and the first 100 users will get $20 as a bonus just for creating your account. And yeah, basically afterwards you can top up to at least $50 just using the link in the description below.
Yeah. Also, don't forget to write comments or ask questions if you have any. So that's actually a very good point, because the short-term volatility leads to immense losses if you need liquidity from it. So if you use it as a store of value and you need it in the wrong moment, that can decrease your value very much. So that's a drawback of Bitcoin. But I think gold is still volatile. It's not completely not
Yes, of
volatile.
course.
So, but of course, Bitcoin is much more volatile. Should we jump to some charts?
Charts, yes, yes, of course. Are you sharing the screen or?
Oh yeah, sure. I can start. Let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
share my screen. So Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So what we can see on the screen is the inflation-adjusted performance of Bitcoin versus gold. And we can see some similarities. Basically, gold and Bitcoin have a similar path in the last few years. So the green lines represents the extreme points of Bitcoin, whereas the orange lines represent the extreme points of gold. And as we can see, when Bitcoin formed a high, only a few 1 month later, gold formed a high, and then gold formed a low, and Bitcoin formed a low when gold formed a high. From there on, there was this big upward movement for gold, and a few months later, Bitcoin had the same big upward movement and formed a high after that. And from there on, you can see on both, we established some sort of lower high, and then since then we are decreasing sharply. So for gold right now, or let's jump to this chart here real quick. So yeah, perfect. So what you can see here is the gold chart. That's the usual candles, and the red line is the inflation-adjusted chart. And what you can see is that gold peaked around 2011 in the inflation-adjusted chart, and since then it's in a strong downtrend. So you can see 2020 was a year where the Federal Reserve printed a lot of money, and gold adjusted a little bit to that. You can see we had a almost it looks like a bull run because it went almost from 1,000 to 2,000. But in reality, if you adjust it to inflation, there wasn't a big jump in price. Actually, gold is decreasing. So right now, I think gold is failing its role as store of value. It still adjusts a little bit to inflation, and is still, of course, better than keeping your money in fiat currencies. But if you look at the inflation-adjusted gold chart, gold is almost at a very strong low, and I think we could actually come back to the 2000 lows. So the numbers here are not correct because it shows the inflation-adjusted performance. So you can just ignore the numbers. But we can see that we have some sort of support there. And in real numbers, we could actually decrease at least to the Fibonacci targets. So right now we're at 50 months EMA, which acts as support at 1,670. But if it fails to hold, we could surely go down to 1,300, where the 200-month EMA is. And if that fails to hold as well, we could even go as low as $800. And if something like that happens, if gold experiences some sort of bear trend now without inflation adjustments, that's really bad because inflation is still very high. That would mean that gold is totally failing.
Yeah.
What we can also see, we have some sort of fib supports at the 50 months EMA here. So this is the fib support taken from that low. But those Fibonacci levels here are actually the biggest ones. So if you really connect the all-time low with the all-time high. Yeah, so I see some similarity in Bitcoin's and gold performance in the last few months. But overall, if you look at Bitcoin, you cannot compare it to gold because the inflation adjustment performance chart is not in a massive downtrend, as you can see. Let me just take that away. So, so this is our inflation-adjusted Bitcoin chart, and as we can see, Of course, we're in a strong downtrend since our all-time high, but in general, Bitcoin is increasing tremendously for the past 10 years, while gold already had its peak years ago. So we can move to gold really quick to show you the whole time frame. So as we can see, we're in a massive downtrend for ages now, and especially since 2011. But gold was much more valuable back in the days. And I think this represents also the sentiment, because nowadays, new generation, they will not look at gold as a store of value, but rather look on digital alternatives. And we saw that also with NFTs, where people didn't buy into diamonds, but rather in some Bored Ape collections.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. But actually, I think you covered everything. Like, there's not really a lot, I guess, I can add. I'll just quick. Uh, no, sorry, just a second. Yeah, just quick look at the gold movement. So just to reiterate that point which you made when you said that like younger generations don't really look at gold as a story of value anymore. I mean, can you see my chart now or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, yeah,
No,
it's
no,
up.
no, it's loading now.
Yeah, okay. So basically, when we look at gold from this, like the 2011 high that you mentioned, basically it went on a 5-year downtrend and decreased by 45%. So I mean that's still pretty volatile, I guess. It's still like more than a 10% drop yearly. And then, but what's more important to me that if you just look at the 10-year chart, right? So the 11-year chart, it's still down basically if we measure from the 2011 high, right? So it did increase a lot from 2015 until this high in either March or so one of the marches either 21 32, but when you look at it in a long-term time frame, it hasn't really held up, and that's not even taking inflation into account. So even just in like absolute values, it hasn't really held its values as well. So yeah, so just going by performance, like if I'm a new investor and all that matters to me is past performance, which I'm sure lots of new investors that's what they're looking at, then yeah, Bitcoin would definitely look a lot more attractive than gold.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it also depends on how you see the world and how pessimistic you are about the future. Because in extreme scenarios, I don't think you can actually do something with gold.
Yeah, it's harder to like go to your bank or vault and take it and then carry it, like transport it on your back. Like yeah, like it's good if like in like normal times, but yeah, I totally see your point.
And some could also do the point to say that Bitcoin is dependent on the internet, but that's not true, because you can also send Bitcoin with radio waves, actually. So I personally did not do it, so it's probably not that easy, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, but even if you go by that, like almost everything is dependent on the internet now. Like basically, if there is no internet, like the vast majority of large companies would like be useless. Right? Facebook or like without internet, or Google or Amazon or everything is like needs internet basically to function. Like we have crossed that period in time a while ago.
Yeah, we are really dependent on our technology these days. So that's kind of scary, especially when you think about electricity fallouts and all the supply chains implications. But yeah, in that case, I mean, when it comes to extreme scenarios, I think almost no alternative than hiding at some water resource or something is a good choice.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So we've got a question. Would you recommend any gold-backed cryptocurrencies, for example, GLC or AABBG?
Huh. To, I mean, to be honest, I'm not familiar with them. Like, I'm assuming either Coinbase or Binance offers them, since they're the ones that usually do synthetic assets. So crypto's backed by something else. So I don't know. I haven't actually done my research in this one. So I can't really say. But given the assumption that it's backed one per one holdings by gold, then sure, it would be just an easier way to buy gold. Again, given that it's backed one by one.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good idea. I'm not familiar with those coins either, but I saw some projects being backed by gold or being backed by diamonds, and for some reason they never made it. It always failed. I'm not sure why. I never investigated, but it seems to be harder than um, than than it seems to be harder than they assume. Sorry, I'm reading this new comment. Any good altcoins to buy and hold during the dip? Tether.
The other, yeah, makes sense. In general, like I like during dips, I like to buy coins that have held up well. So I don't know. So especially in my beginnings as a trader, so my logic would be like I would buy a coin that has fallen a lot, because if it returns to its previous values, it like would give the greatest profit. But what I found now is that that usually doesn't happen. So it's actually the opposite. So coins that have actually held up well during the dip will perform better once the bull run starts. But yeah, they will still decrease during the dip, obviously. So like constant inside tether.
Yeah, Tether is also dangerous according to some sources. So I trust Binance US dollar
Yeah, same.
because I really trust CZ and this whole organization of Binance. I think they are really professional. But after all, this is not financial advice. Really important to mention that. So nothing we endorse. We don't endorse here anything, and we don't recommend doing anything. But in general, I realized that there's one strategy that really worked out for me when I was really new in the industry and I had no idea what I was doing. So basically, what I did is instead of focusing on one coin, I was focusing on many coins with a very small amount of money. So the good thing about it is only one coin has to 100x, and all the others can go to zero, and you're still
And you
profitable.
still make money. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this
So
only
you
works
just
in a bull run, of course, not in a bear market. And I think in a bear market, um, there are only two ways to handle it. Either way, like one way is to dollar cost average. So you purchase every month at the same day, the same size of position of a specific coin. But in general, I would suggest waiting for confirmation, and don't purchase anything during the bear market, because if the bear market is ending, there's always confirmation, and it's better to miss out on the very best prices than to purchase a lot of prices that continue to decrease. Um, so let's say Solana found its all-time low at $1, right? Of course, it's the best option to purchase at $1, but it's better to wait for that moment to happen and then actually purchase it at $30, and it still jumps to 300. So that's just my opinion. So wait for confirmation.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Like, I don't really have any differing opinions.
And we didn't really talk about Bitcoin now. I mean, Bitcoin is dumping again, but we already talked about it last time. We assume that it goes to its previous low, and if it doesn't hold there, we could go even lower, maybe to the monthly close of 2018 at 13,880, something around that area. That's what I think.
Yeah, same. Yeah, like we discussed it last time. I don't really have a new idea on that. So basically, just that previous movement. So I mean, if you don't have anything to add, I mean, this would be it from my side.
Yeah, I don't see any new questions coming in. Yeah, I think that's it.
Oh, okay, everyone. So thanks for watching our weekly show, and we will see you all next week. And we will be talking about the Ethereum merge because I think we're gonna have the discussion on the 15th, which is the projected day for when the merge will occur.
Somebody is asking, is the dollar continuing to rise?
I think
Again,
yeah,
against what? Like, is this?
I mean the dollar currency index is still rising if the DXY, so if that is what is referring to. But yeah, in general, it's still rising. I mean, it has parity with the euro now, and yeah, the dollar currency index is at like so. Yeah, since I'll just share the screen real quick.
Okay, he means the interest rates.
Oh, ah, I'm not sure. Okay, then I don't need to share the screen. So I think actually I didn't follow the latest Fed meeting. I'm not sure though. I think they said that they'll continue increasing them at a lower rate. So basically, they are prioritizing battling inflation rather than trying to keep the economy afloat in a way. But yeah, I didn't really follow the last meeting all that much.
Okay, the one last question, and then the session is done. For some reason, I cannot see the full screen of the comments.
1 second. Ah, the Bitcoin dominance rate. So that's the newest, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it actually does. Can I also comment here or no? Maybe no. I actually did an article on this yesterday. So, um, okay, I'll just pull up the chart and now share the screen. I think it does actually. It's very, very likely,
Yeah, I agree.
but it does because, yes, so it has just broken down from this. Okay, wait, my chart isn't there yet. Not yet, right?
Not yet, yeah. But I think we both agree that Bitcoin dominance
Yeah,
will go
yeah,
to
yeah.
35.
And also would fit with the Ethereum Bitcoin chart that we showed last time. So because Ethereum is the largest altcoin by its market cap, so its movements greatly affect the Bitcoin dominance rate. So basically, if ETH is gaining towards Bitcoin, then the Bitcoin dominance rate decreases. So yeah, I think it will basically break down towards 34.
Also, Ethereum versus Bitcoin is almost about to break out bullishly, and
Yes.
actually, I think there could be a flippening. So I think it's a real possibility because Ethereum only needs to double its price to surpass Bitcoin's market cap. And we all know jumping from, I don't know, 1,700 to 3,500 is it's not a big deal for crypto.
Yeah, yeah, it's very doable.
And if Bitcoin continues to decrease maybe to 10K, then and Ethereum holds its value, then Ethereum doesn't even need to jump that high. And so I think the chance of a flipping was never higher than right now, especially if Bitcoin breaks the 35% dominance, because that was the all-time low, I think. And then there's no support after that. Oh, you're muted right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's basically the last chance, the way I see it.
Yeah, because we are at the last support right now, right? Before we hit 35. And
Yes.
after we hit 35 and we break it bearishly, we could go
Then
to
there is, yeah.
any number, basically. All right. So since this was the very last question, thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much for giving your valuable insights, Waltran.
Yeah, thanks you too for the conversation.
And then see you next week on the Ethereum merge.
Perfect. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye bye.